Check them out today at weapons-universe.com. Okay, Ray, I've been adding my points. You got cut off by the break. You were getting into, they're out in Nevada. It's one of the main command centers. I've just seen it on the news. People in trailers, and he's like, it showed one of the young men. He goes, I love video games. Now I control the Predator. And it showed him sitting there, and they're going, okay, you've got clearance. Hit him. Go ahead and give it to him. And I mean, just it's so bizarre to see this. Break it down for us.
Well, let me put it this way. The chaplains out there at Creech Air Force Base, they're working overtime because some of these young fellas have a conscience. They do their work during the day. They go home and have dinner with their families, and they think, the wife says, well, how'd things go at work today? And they can't quite say, well, we killed, we shot Hellfire missiles at 30 groups, and we're not real sure. So, long story short, these chaplains are actually being visited regularly by these poor NCOs who are ordered to do this kind of thing and have it on their conscience to their credit. The other guys are the ones in Langley, Virginia, who are working for the CIA. They're the ones that have the joysticks there, and they're the ones that fly over Pakistan. Why? Well, because we're literally, or at least technically not at war with Pakistan, so it has to be the CIA, it can't be the Air Force. Well, it's the same sort of thing. People who identify these targets, either from people who may have grievances against this particular village, or people who think they see militants, whatever they look like, as distinguished from wedding parties, from 30,000 feet. So, the whole thing is an indication of the lack of leadership in the military of our country as well as in the political side, because you can't win a war this way. All you can do is alienate the affections of people. And what I keep telling people is that in Pakistan, if you take the population of Pakistan, 165, 170 million, okay, that's 40 million more than the population of Afghanistan, Iran, and Iraq put together. Besides, of course, Pakistan has nuclear weapons. Now, I would ask you, which country should be the most important not to alienate the population in?
Well, sir, we've seen Pakistani leaders, and we've got an article up on Infowars.com that's got the newscasts and even ABC News, with Pakistani leaders saying, look, your government is running a lot of the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, and they're using it to destabilize our country, and and that's what Hamid Gul, who I was bizarrely contacted by a year and a half ago, and he came on this show, and it made national news when he did, and he said that they're killing these tribal groups to actually get them up in arms, and that's what Gerald Celente, the Trends Forecaster, says. He says, look, the U.S. government isn't going to have to stage terror attacks as a pretext to get the American people to give their liberty up. You kill enough Pakistanis who are tribal, they're going to come over here and they're going to blow stuff up.
Well, we've seen the effects of that, haven't we? When Bush said we have to kill them over there before they come here, well, that was ridiculous in the extreme. What we need to do is figure out what's really going on in those countries, why they hate us. It ain't because of our democracy or of our freedom. Now, with respect to the Pakistanis, you can see U.S. high-level pronouncements say, we're working on the Pakistanis to show them, to demonstrate that their greatest threat is not from India. No, it's from these insurgents, these militants, these people that are in the tribal areas, right? Well, give me a break. There's no kind of rhetoric or logic that is going to persuade the Pakistanis that their main enemy isn't India. Of course it is. And so why do they keep feeding the Taliban? Why do they keep making it difficult for the U.S. to end the job there? Because they see an advantage in keeping the pot boiling in Afghanistan. They don't want an Indian-dominated government in Afghanistan. They want to keep the pot boiling. And so all these pronouncements about the U.S., we're going to probably persuade them. Well, we're going to persuade them them that their strategic interest is not in India, but in these. Give me a break. We're never going to persuade them of that. And so this thing will just keep going and going. And the worst news, of course, is that our congressional people, even the good ones like Dave Obey, have now caved again. And it looks like there will be an escalation to the tune of $33 billion. And that will buy many more months of killing and war.
And people can go to Common Dreams website and others and read your new article. Give folks that title again one more time, Ray.
Well, it's a letter to David Obey, who's the head of appropriations. It's a memo that says, look, you called Afghanistan a fool's errand. And then you said, yeah, but we have to fund it. That doesn't make any logical sense, Dave. What's really going on here? And what's really going on here is he's out of there in January. He wants to not alienate the affections of the Washington establishment, and he's letting go to the House a bill that will include enough lipstick, namely the $23 billion for teachers, so that the $33 billion for Afghanistan war will go through. That is unconscionable. He knows better than that, and he can call me an idiot liberal, or that's what he calls some of my friends. But what I'm telling him is that he's a terrible disappointment because he should have stood his ground and not confessed to be, quote, bone tired.
And again, Ray, this has nothing to do with liberal conservative. It's right and wrong. Obama is expanding the wars. Bush expanded it. This is the policy of the establishment. But just briefly, because I want to get into Iran and the North Korea and the time we've got left with you, picking your brain, we appreciate the time. And, of course, you just come on out of the goodness of your heart to do it. I wish you had a book or something we could promote for folks to get your word out even more, but hopefully that's coming in the future. But over the years, you've been so gracious, is my point. What is the exit strategy? Is the exit strategy never leave like Germany or Japan or South Korea? I mean, is the exit strategy quagmire?
Well, I asked Khalid, our former ambassador in Afghanistan. He's actually an Afghan. I asked him at a RAND conference 2 months ago. I said, you don't say much about the oil pipeline anymore or the natural gas pipeline to Afghanistan. Where does that stand? You were in on that from the beginning. And he thought for a second, and he said, well, with all the violence and all the fighting there along the pipeline route, we can't possibly build it right now. Now, I wasn't allowed a follow-up, but my follow-up was going to be, so that's why we're there, to put down the violence, to get the Taliban out of there, and then clear a path for the oil and gas pipelines. Is that it, Ambassador Khalilzad? So, it's a strategic sort of thing where the U.S. will not act in any other way than as an empire. And you need to have a little bit of humility because we're not going to be able to call the shots in that part of the world anymore.
Well, here's my next question. As you know, you've studied it more than most out there. Nobody's ever been able to successfully continually conquer these people. Can you just briefly sum up in maybe 2 minutes the mindset of these tribal groups, these Pashtuns and others in Afghanistan and in areas of Pakistan? Because from my layman research and what every other analyst going back 400 years, people who fought there have said is the more you kill them, the more they fight. Just like Americans used to be. What happened with the British here? That's what any red-blooded group is going to do. They're not going to stop fighting. They're not drinking fluoride and watching I Love Lucy. They're not fat, dumb, happy Americans.
Well, I'd rather be, back in 1776, I sure would rather have been an insurgent rather than a, cooperator with the Tories. In a word, there are these strange people in Afghanistan. They're in tribes mostly, and they have this strange resistance to invaders coming into their country. And they have the benefit of these huge mountains and very vulnerable valleys. And so going back 2,500 years, Alex, to Alexander the Great, who was the first of about 7 big countries trying to conquer Afghanistan, they've been able to, the tribal leaders have been able to block that. And what I tell people is, why they call Alexander the Great? Well, they call him the Great because he was sensible enough to look at the height of those mountains, to look at the casualties he was already taking on his flanks from these, quote, militants, and turn around and say, this wasn't a good idea. I'm going back to Asia Minor where I can outlast all this. That's what made him great. From him, since him, you have the Indians, you have the Persians, you have the Mongolians under Genghis Khan, you have the British, you have the Russians, and now the Americans are going to succeed where all those didn't. Give me a break.
Oh, boy. So what, we're going to be there in 5 years still. It's just never going to end. A meat grinder they feed troops into, and out of it comes oil pipelines and opium.
Well, I'm hopeful that the American people, if they listen to people like us, finally, I think I have a basic faith in the American people. They're good sense, and I think there's a limit to what they will tolerate. The big challenge, of course, Alex, and the reason I come on your show and applaud what you're doing is that you are one